Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike McMahon. I'm the Executive Director of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. And it's really my pleasure today to welcome Marty Haugen for this interview as part of our series, 100 Years of Song. Marty is probably best known as a liturgical composer, and he's created more than 400 works, most of which are for congregational singing. He's known ecumenically. His hymns and service settings have appeared in hymnals across the English-speaking world of various denominations. And I think it's going to be interesting to talk to him about sort of the trajectory of congregational song and, of course, the trajectory of his own career today. So thank you for being with us, Marty. It's great to be with you.
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you. You know, there's so much to talk about, but I'd like to start with your own background, sort of talk about, how you came to get interested in congregational song and church ministry and music in the church. Was there any early influence in your family or your early life?
Well, I grew up in a very small community in southern Minnesota, just 800 people, and there were two churches, a Norwegian Lutheran Church and a Swedish Lutheran Church. So hardly an ecumenical environment, but it was typical that most people in the community went to church in those days. And we all sang hymns, only hymns, strophic hymns, facing one direction, singing. And in my memory, we always sang in four-part harmony, but when I revisited it, I realized that was only in my head. But people did sing. And at home, we sang too. I remember we got a stereo when I was about 10, and that's when we stopped singing around the piano because we started listening to music. It wasn't a conscious thing that happened. It's just before that, we normally would sing. My siblings and I with my mom would sing around the piano. My dad would sort of try to sing off in the corner. But that was part of our milieu. That's what we grew up with.
Wow. Did you get involved in music at the church?
I took piano from the age of about 6, and when I was about 11 or 12, my piano teacher got dementia, and by default, I became the organist. So at that point, we went to the next town so I could take organ as well.
Wow.
So I played the hymns at my own community from about the age of 12 on. Not real well, but there was a forgiving congregation.
Well, they sang anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, so going to church was something you didn't actually consider whether or not you were going to go to church. You just did.
Right. So the hymns that you sang were what kind of hymns were they?
Well, when I was first doing music at the church, we had what Lutherans often call the red hymnal, called the service book and hymnal. And there were some wonderful hymns in the Bach harmonizations. And I fell in love with the sounds of those harmonizations. It was a rich book. When the Lutherans did the next book, the Green Book, they wanted to make it more distinctly Lutheran, so they called it the Lutheran Book of Worship. Service book and hymnal was an attempt to actually try and make a broader spectrum of hymnody.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I did not realize the Green Book was an attempt to be more.
Well, I shouldn't be speaking on behalf of the people who were the editors of the book, but my sense was so a lot of the Bach chorales were reduced to unison with the idea that the Lutherans originally sang these hymns in unison.
That's interesting. And so you studied piano and organ, and you had a lot of experience. So did you go on to study music later on?
Yeah, I picked up the guitar along with everybody else who was growing up in the 60s, but it never crossed my mind the guitar would ever be used in a worship setting. But I went on to a Lutheran college, Luther College, and I started out studying music. And it's interesting because I think back on the previous interviews you've had, and so much of what the others said resonated with me. I think, like Sally Ann Morris, I went through different denominational experiences. Luther was just Lutheran, but I didn't expect to be a church musician. At the end of my freshman year, I was a music major, and I said to my advisor, I'm going to drop my major. And he said, why? Well, I said I could be a performer. I don't have the skills. I could be a teacher, and I don't have the patience, and I certainly don't want to be a church musician. My idea of a church musician was someone who sat at the organ and played the hymns. And I was taking organ at college as well, but I was never a really good organist.
Uh-huh. So, but you obviously changed your mind.
Well, I think the spirit changed my mind.
How did that happen?
Um, well, I spent a year in England at a retreat center, and during the time there, as one of the volunteers, we'd go out and play at an Anglican church nearby, which had maybe 12 people in it. And when I came back and was sort of at a loss at what to do, I took a job for what I thought would be a year at a Catholic church because I didn't have skills to do much else. And the year I spent there turned into 15 years. And there was a place that the guitar was coming in as well. So the reason I got the job was I could play the organ and the guitar. So they didn't have to hire two people.
Wow. And this was back in Minnesota, I take it.
This is back in Minnesota in 73.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the year because I think the timing is interesting. The Second Vatican Council ended in 1965, and then it was in 1970 that the new Order of Mass, the Roman Missal, was published. And so the the things that people were being asked to sing was all relatively new at that point, right?
Well, yes, while I was at Luther College, the youth minister there brought in a book called Hymnal for Young Christians, and I didn't realize that was one of the very, very early Catholic books. And so in college, we'd go out and do these evenings of music with guitar. So when I came to the Catholic Church, they, like you said, they were just starting out, and the holes in the repertoire were huge because they brought in a lot of Protestant hymnody, but at the same time, the Catholic Church liturgy had different demands, like the Psalms. And that was the time when I came back to the Psalms, not just as someone who read the Psalms, but as saw them as music. And that really fired my first interest in writing for the Psalms.
So is that where you started writing?
Well, I'd written some really bad music before that. And in my first years of my parish in 73, I started writing what I would call congregational music. And it was pretty awful. So fortunately, I had an audience, a congregation that would be willing to tell me what they thought of it. So I wrote for a number of years before I actually sent it off for publication.
So it is interesting to me, though, that really your foundation in composition was writing for people that you were serving, people that you were working with week to week. And I'm wondering how that dynamic was in terms of the back and forth.
Well, I think being raised Lutheran, what was pounded into me, I mean, I was invited into understanding, was that music within worship is always at the service of the community. So it never crossed my mind, and I don't have the skills to write really complex choral music. I admire people who can do it, but I feel much more comfortable writing for the congregational voice. In fact, my greatest joy is hearing congregations sing. That sounds kind of odd, but I love hearing beautiful music by choirs as well. But it's just something wonderful to hear people without vocal training or experience latching on to singing a hymn or a psalm and
Well,
really enjoying it.
I think you're talking to the right audience when you say that. I mean, I think, you
Yeah,
know,
that's one of the reasons why I really feel comfortable with and really enjoy being at hymn society gatherings.
yeah, yeah. So at some point, you did start to publish your music, and what were the first kinds of things that were published of yours?
Um, well, I had sent music off initially to the Lutheran Church, but they had just come out with the Green Hymnal in the mid 70s, and so they really didn't have a real desire or need for congregational music. So I sent music off to Roman Catholic churches, and I mean, well, actually, first of all, I had a group of musician friends in my hometown in Bloomington, Minnesota, we'd get together and share songs, and that was a way of winnowing out. They could give me advice
Hmm.
in addition to the congregation. I was first published by a very small publisher that went out of business, and GIA acquired the music. And it's such an evolving process. I find, I've said this before, I think I find it much more difficult to write words as I get older. Um, Music, I mean, you can write a bad melody very quickly. Writing a really good melody is hard, but writing a good text is really tricky, especially if you assume or hope that people will sing it, and if they sing it enough, they may come to believe it. So it's quite a responsibility. And as I over the years, I've come to rely more on good text writers, and of course, the Hymn Society has a plethora of good text writers.
Indeed. But you have produced a lot of texts that have become quite well known, and you've done a lot of work with your own texts and tunes married to one another. Um, but I hear you saying that that's not no longer really your preference.
Well, if you can work with Mel Bringle or Adam Tice or Jackie Jones or Hannah Brown or David Bjorlin, you don't need to write your own text. There are
Yeah.
people who are really good at that.
So I've been fascinated by a lot of our conversations with text writers and tune writers about where they like to start. Some say, well, the text has to come first, and some say, well, I like to work. Mel Bringle, for one, says, I like to have a tune and then
Yeah.
write a text for that tune. I'm just kind of wondering where you fall in that spectrum.
Yeah, I understand that people have different approaches. I always need the text first. I've tried writing just music without words, and it doesn't work for me. I think the text, especially if it's a psalm text or canticle, it sort of sings to you, and you
Uh-huh.
just sing it in your head, and then you say, where is this text taking the music? That's just my own personal preference.
Yeah, I think probably most people seem to take that approach. I can remember Sally Ann Morris saying, "Well, I wake up with a tune in my head, and I just have to write it down and
Yeah.
I guess send it to Mel Bringle next." But it's fascinating. Another thing about your writing that I think is pretty significant is I think you've been perceived as sort of a bridge builder in a musical bridge builder in the church. That someone who sort of has overcome the divide between so-called traditional and so-called contemporary approaches to liturgical music. And I wonder if that was something you deliberately set
Oh,
out to do, or
that's and I think there's different kinds of bridge building. There's bridge building like you're talking about between musical styles, and then there's bridge building across cultures,
Mhm.
across language. And I haven't been especially good at doing that as I would like. My second parish had very distinct liturgies. It was a Catholic church. One was only guitar and other instruments. The other was only organ. And so at high feast days or when they'd have common gatherings, they would argue about over which liturgical setting they would use. So back in 84, 85, I wrote a setting called Mass of Creation, and I gave it I wrote a part that could be done on guitar and gave it to the group and said, "This is your mass." And then I wrote a different arrangement for the organ and told them, "This is your mass." And when we came together, both sides thought they were singing their own mass. With the Catholic tradition and as well, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Anglicans, where the propers, the mass parts become essential and sort of an anchor, that was a good starting point to try and build some kind of bridge between the two.
Well, I can remember being at the convention of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians in 1985 when that mass was premiered for sort of for the world, and with Michael Joncas singing the Eucharistic prayer and all that. And I just remember it being sort of almost a revolutionary moment in among U.S. Catholics for having a mass setting that could encompass all the things you're talking about. Um, and I wonder, I wonder how that was for you to sort of experience that people taking to it so quickly.
It's always gratifying to hear a congregation. I'm sure any member of the hymn society would say to hear it sung by people when you're not involved in planning or leading or choosing it. It's a wonderful feeling to hear people sing it. And it was safer with the mass parts because I would give them the words and I couldn't do bad theology. I just had to do with what I had.
Right. Fair enough.
Although, even so, I've been accused of doing bad theology with the parts of the mass. So
Well, I was going
that's a
to,
whole nother conversation.
sure. I was going to say that even the way you set the words does theologize on them, right? For example, if you're setting the priest's parts for the prayer, which parts do you emphasize and that kind of thing. So, and I take it that you began to do a lot of reflection with other people about how to compose for the liturgical action.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Michael Joncas, I once heard give a talk from the Roman Catholic perspective. He said, the first wave was writing songs, just so many songs about the community. Here we are all together as we sing our song. Then he said the next wave by the St. Louis Jesuits and other groups was taking scripture texts and setting them to music. And the third wave was looking at ritual form and how music helps ritual form be more meaningful to the community. And I think I'm sure other denominations have had similar sort of evolutions.
Sure, sure. And of course, that's another thing that I think you bring to this is you've been very ecumenical in your writing and in your music making. I mean, your work has been picked up in denominations of all types around the country, and even in your own personal journey. I know that you've served different types of denominations.
Yeah.
And,
I think I heard Sally Ann Morris talk about that as well in her interview. I'm sure, I don't know if it's true, but I heard a quote attributed to Eric Routley, which is fairly well known, that said, church musicians are the most ecumenically promiscuous people in the church.
right.
And I think music can, if it's good theology and a sturdy tune, it can help move across denominations. That's another kind of bridge building.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things I admire about the Hymn Society is how, I mean, there's a lot of professional organizations that are identified as this is a Lutheran organization, this is a Catholic organization, this is a Presbyterian, but Hymn Society is across the board, and I think it's a great strength of it.
Yeah, it is interesting, that in the Hymn Society, it's obviously extraordinarily ecumenical, and yet there's nothing really stated about this is a Christian organization or this is an ecumenical organization. I mean, it sort of just is, and it sort of has lived into this way of being with each other, and it has been, I think, from early on.
It's sort
But
of like I sing, therefore I am.
right?
Yeah, it's no more defined. But and I've admired, especially at the times, one of the things that brought me into the hymn society was when I started to see the reaching across national boundaries and musical styles and language. Uh, you can hear every style at hymn society meetings, and you hear music from all these countries. First hymn, I don't know if it was the very first, but one of the first ones I went to was when Pablo Sosa was speaking, and that made a deep impression on me.
Yeah. Say more about that. What was it about his presentation?
Well, I see, this is my own naivete. I when I grew up, I thought the church ended at the walls of the Lutheran Church.
Hmm.
Then I learned that there were other churches, Christian churches, and then I heard things, the freedom songs from South Africa, and I thought that's burst out of the church walls, but it's also taking the message and making it alive in the world. And then I heard Pablo Sosa say the same thing about Latin America. And so each time I was invited and experienced a broader vision of the church.
Hmm.
I didn't realize how parochial my own vision was until I experienced the others.
Yeah, I think we all have that experience at some point in our lives, right? I mean, we learn that our horizons are limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're still writing, yes?
Yeah, I mentioned to you before the interview that I've come full circle. Before I got published, I wrote for one community, the one that I was working in, and currently I belong to Creekside United Church of Christ. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I have written for that community. And what I've been doing every Advent and Lent is contemplative worship, sort of in the style of Taizé, incorporating Taizé music, Iona music, other world music, and then I've written quite a bit of simple songs, short ones that we can incorporate into our contemplative worship. So my writing, I think it's always been writing for within a community, which I think is the only way I can write. I was asked to write a setting for the ELW, the Evangelical Lutheran Worship Book. And that was hard for me because at the time I wasn't working in a Lutheran church and I couldn't visualize a community. And I can't just think of a denomination and write for that. I need to write for people and faces and stories.
Uh-huh. I think I'm familiar with that setting. Isn't that now the celebration or
Oh, well, no, that was separate.
oh,
That was a commission. Yeah, that wasn't for a hymnal. The Pacific Lutheran University commissioned it. I had written an evening prayer called Holden Evening Prayer, and it was written in conversation with the community that I was living in. And it was up in the mountains in the winter, and we had evening prayer every night, and then people would sit around. There's nothing to do, and then critique evening prayer. So so that's what I wrote for. But and two of the pastors from there said they were at a student congregation in Pacific Lutheran and said, could you write a setting for us that would be written in dialogue with the student body? So the students would have conversations and help me with the text and music. So that wasn't for the larger church. That was for us, and that helped that
wow.
I was writing for a community that gave me feedback.
That's really interesting. There are a couple of questions that on in the chat, which may first I want to pause and just say, if you're watching this right now, we do welcome you to join in the conversation through the chat, or if you want to put a question in the Q&A, uh, that would be good also. But I'm going to ask Deb Steiner was asking about these short songs that you just recently published, and she
Mhm.
wanted to know if I'm sorry,
Yeah,
wanted to know if they've
I,
been published.
I received the book on Ash Wednesday.
Ah,
I had asked GI to get it out in time for people who do Lenten contemplative worship, but they had a lot to do. It's called Open Our Hearts. and it's on the GI website now, I hope. And it's about 45, 50 songs. And then about a dozen of them are by other hymn society members. There's songs by Sally Ann Morris and songs by Jackie Jones and Hannah Brown and I'm gonna mess up and forget some of the people, but it was some, so it's a common, it's about 45, 50 pieces. And I use them in my community during Lent and Advent, interspersed with Taizé songs, Iona songs. I don't know if I should say any more about it, but and it's songs that we've been sung for the last 15 years. So it's songs that I finally had enough gathered. I thought, we can put these out. Maybe they'll be helpful for people who are doing contemplative worship.
Yeah,
And I found that our community, the UCC, we is really, I belong to the most wonderful faith community, great music program, wonderful leaders, and we sing everything. The services are not isolated by style. And so, but I find that people, even though our Sunday service may be filled with a lot of words, people still resonate well with contemplative, quiet worship, like in the style of Taizé.
cool. Um, Ana Hernandez uh, was sort of commenting on what you've been talking about. She said that I hear you about writing for community. It's the best. And then
Yeah.
she was asking about the publication, which you just answered. And so another person watching said they found it on the GIA website. So
Yeah, I think, when I listen to music by people like John Rutter, Eric Whitaker, it's just glorious music, but I could never do that. And I don't think that's my calling. And I truly love hearing congregationals sing with enthusiasm. It's been, especially where I live in Minneapolis, there's been a resurgence of community singing over the last couple months. And it made
mhm.
me so aware of how what we sing galvanizes us, feeds us, and it's happening. Our community's got we have a minister of justice, and this person is really doing a great job of teaching resistance songs at our parish too. And I think the success of the churches in the future will depend on the degree that they can make the deep connections between what we do and sing and worship and how that engages us in the world.
And I think that's been characteristic of your work all along. I mean, I think your work has always shown a belief in the connection between what we do in worship and how we work for justice in the world. I mean, I think that's been
Mm.
very characteristic of your work.
One of the influential books for me, it was written by a man named Tom Schatauer, who was at Wartburg Seminary in Dubuque. It's called Inside Out Worship. And he talked about three models. And the first model was inside and outside, which is what I grew up with, which meant what happened in Sunday, what we sang in Sunday, the words we said didn't have a direct connection with the outside world. They were two different things.
Mhm.
And then he said in the late 20th century, people said, well, let's make worship look more like the world because that will make more sense. So worship spaces started to look like auditoriums and music started to look like what you might hear on MTV. And the trouble with that is the message of the gospel was superseded by the message of the world. And what he's suggesting is inside out worship, where what we say and do is in conversation where the gospel speaks to the world. And I think that's when we're at our best. And that's what I hear at the Hymn Society in the texts that are written and the music that's sung.
Wow. That's very, very important. Um, I'd like to go back to your involvement in the Hymn Society. And you mentioned that the first conference you came to, you um, encountered Pablo Sosa. I wonder if you'd say a little more about your involvement in the Hymn Society and things that have, sort of affected you or made you want to contribute more or be involved more.
Well, one of the years I was one of the people, the Hymn Society does these wonderful sessions where someone invites text and someone else invites tunes. And one year I was one of the people who helped participate in that. Um, I get, see, the other conferences, to be honest, I usually go to conferences if I'm presenting. Hymn Society is the only conference I would go to where I would, if I'm not presenting, I'd still want to be there. So my involvement is probably like most of the people in the Hymn Society. They just
Yeah.
come to find collegiality and to support each other and to learn from each other.
I mean, what you're saying is something I've heard from so many people, that it's a place where we learn from one another. It's a place where we relate to one another. It's a place where you sit down next to somebody and you realize, my gosh, that's somebody whose hymns I've been singing my whole life. That kind of thing. It's been
Mhm.
amazing experience. Yeah. So uh, I wonder about the short form that you have been writing in lately. And I'm thinking that because Ana Hernandez is on the call on is watching, and she's been involved with the music makes community and
Mhm.
the paperless
Yeah.
music movement, and which relies on the short form really to bring people together. And I was just interested that you've sort of gotten much more into that in recent years.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, I think I first experienced the Taizé music back in the early 80s, and my wife and I were blessed to make a couple trips to Iona and experience music there. And it was growing up in the Lutheran Church, we had beautiful music, but there wasn't a sense, there's a wonderful old Bible hymn, come into my hearts, Lord Jesus. And I, I grew up thinking that religion was more about come into my head. And I learned when the first time I experienced Taizé prayer that I thought, at first you think, oh, we're going to sing the same thing over and over. Get it, that was still in the head mode. But people, I think, resonate with it, especially, this is the key thing with short songs. If you're only going to use, it's like a haiku, you have to say something worth saying if you're going to just write a short form.
right.
And if I try and write something, I just get away from the instrument and go for a walk. I used to go for runs, now I go for walks, but I sing it in my head over and over again. And all the best hymns and songs work really well a cappella, I've found. If I can't sing it on a walk, uh, I need to come back and actually the melody will change and sing itself. And a friend of mine, I have two very good friends, Tom Witt and Pastor Susan Brill, who've created something they call Prayer Around the Cross, which is published by Augsburg, and it's short songs and contemplative services, and that was an inspiration for me about approaching it. That's why I thought, okay, I could do a book of this because I've got enough. Um, and I think, and actually now on our Sunday worship at our community, we incorporate a couple simple chants and 3 or 4 minutes of silence after the homily on our Sunday service, which for UCC is a little unusual,
I could say.
but people appreciate it.
Yeah, interesting. I'm also struck with, you're writing short form songs for contemplative worship, and you were mentioning you have a minister of justice who's teaching people resistance songs, which are meant to be sung out on the street, short form also, right? And just curious about the relationship then between these contemplative songs and these songs of resistance.
Yeah, I think we forget that, for most of human history, people have sung without instruments and without printed music. And I think there's something about letting the song take root in you. And there's something different about writing a song to be sung at a protest movement on the street versus in a contemplative worship. The words may be the same, but but I did for this book write a couple songs that were a little more forceful. But I think that Anna's group, the music they do is just wonderful, and I don't need to try and match that or improve on it, but it's.
Right, but there are always new contributions that are welcome. I'm sure of that.
But my friend Tom Witt said, when you're singing in the contemplative service, sing until you think people are getting uncomfortable, and then sing a little bit longer, and then start inviting people to sort of release their need to have chronos, clock time.
Right, you have to
That's
kind
one of
of
the nice things about the contemplative worship. I don't think anybody will finish it, and if we've taken the time for it, people will stay afterwards. And I feel like sometimes I stop playing too soon because people need to have that kind of chirotic time,
right.
spacious time.
I think you kind of need to move past the point where you're past the discomfort point, right? So
Mhm.
that you can kind of settle into a new.
And it's an unlearning for a lot of us. I think we feel I grew up thinking I knew exactly when 60 minutes had passed at a service. And now we go 90 minutes. And a friend of mine, Ray East, is a African American priest in Anacostia, DC, and we went to his church once. Well, first of all, we came in, and it was all African American congregation except for my wife and I and our friend, and then two Georgetown students across the aisle. And he got up and said, "Or do we have any guests here today?" And after everybody had laughed, he said, "Let's make people feel welcome." And we had to greet every single person in the church before we could pray. And at going out, I heard a woman say, "Wow, this is not supposed to be any longer than an hour and a half. He's gone 2 hours." And I thought, boy, and I know that in places in Africa, different countries, that worship can take all day.
Right.
And
Well,
so we have a lot of unlearning to do to sort of say, when we gather, we have to really see how we make that. And for us, having the simple chant after prayer, and then they ring a singing bowl and we sit for 3 minutes. We used to sit for 30 seconds and we gradually, that changes the whole dynamic of our worship. We have a ton of announcements, so we get them out of the way at the beginning.
uh-huh. Um, Well, I don't know if there is anything else that you were hoping we would talk about. So I'm just give you this chance to say, is there something else you'd like to?
No, I think I'm looking forward to being with the Hymn Society this summer. And no, I'm so grateful for what I see happening in communities today, especially, it's been a difficult time in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul,
Yeah.
but I have just been completely blown away by the clergy and the musicians and the communities and what they've done. I think there was a sense that our city would collapse during this period, and instead it's been galvanized in ways that's been really inspiring, and seeing that coming out of faith communities.
And who like to sing. I mean, it's been striking to me to watch the clergy and church communities in Minneapolis come out, and they are singing, and the resistance has been very tied to those expressions.
There was an African American musician in around the time after the post-Civil War. His last name was Simpson. I feel embarrassed that I can't remember his first name, but his quote was, "You can sing what it would be death to speak." And I thought, singing can get under your skin. And after a while, if you sing something revolutionary, radical, like All Are Welcome, you sing it often enough and it starts to get under your skin, and you think, okay. In fact, that hymn has been banned in a number of Catholic dioceses.
Well, that's not surprising, but
No, but the words we sing work on us over time.
right. Well, they can also create cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, gee, what we're singing and what we're doing are not the same.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how the church has always been at its best, when it's making people uncomfortable.
Well,
Doesn't
well,
always make
let me just say you're doing a great job.
sometimes, yeah.
Well, one final question, and that is, I was wondering if you could tell us, what would be your fondest hope for the Hymn Society as we move forward?
Just that it keeps doing what it's doing. I think there's a sense that the people who come to it and the people who are leading it, like Brian Haynes' work, and I just finished taking an online course from Michael Hahn that was sort of deeply connected to the Hymn Society. It's that kind of outreach that I think is so needed, and I just hope it continues the way it has.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marty. And thank you for everything that you have contributed, that all of us have benefited from
Yeah.
as singing members of the Christian community.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I recognize in the Hymn Society, everybody there realizes the reciprocity of ministry, and that's what one of the big values of the Hymn Society.
Indeed. Well, thank you again. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. And if you're watching this on recording, greetings to you as well. And hope we'll see you next month for another interview. Take care. Bye bye.